Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
James Bond. It sounds simple, but in reality, those 6 words didn't just introduce a character, they introduced a feeling of control, confidence, mystery. And back in 1962, no one could have predicted just how powerful that feeling would become. Because when Dr. No first hit theaters, it wasn't treated like a major cinematic event. There were no massive campaigns, no global anticipation, no guarantee of success. Instead, it arrived quietly, almost cautiously, but behind that quiet release was a production filled with uncertainty, bold decisions, and creative risks that could have easily gone wrong. This isn't just the story of a film, it's the story of how a global icon was built, piece by piece, decision by decision. And along the way, you'll discover details that most people have never heard. Moments that almost changed everything, and choices that defined the future of cinema. Some of these facts will surprise you. Some will completely shift your perspective, and one might make you wonder how this franchise even exists at all. Here are 20 jaw-dropping facts you've probably never heard. Let's saddle up. Number 1. Before Sean Connery became James Bond, the role was something very different in the minds of producers and even the creator himself. Picture this: a polished gentleman, smooth, refined, almost aristocratic. That's the version Ian Fleming imagined while writing the novels. Someone like Hoagie Carmichael, calm, composed, and effortlessly elegant. So when casting discussions began, the names being considered reflected that vision. Cary Grant was at the top of the list. He had the charm, the presence, the global recognition. But there was a problem. Grant didn't want to commit to a long-term deal. He was willing to do one film, but not an entire series. And for the producers, that wasn't enough. Then came Patrick McGoohan, talented, intense, a strong performer. But he turned the role down for a completely different reason. He wasn't comfortable with the character's moral direction, the violence, the lifestyle. It didn't align with his personal values. So now the producers faced a challenge. They needed someone new, someone unknown, someone willing to grow with the role. Enter Sean Connery. At the time, he wasn't the obvious choice. His background was different. His presence felt rougher, less refined. But when he walked into the room, something shifted. He didn't fit the original idea of Bond. He challenged it. There was a quiet intensity in the way he carried himself, a sense that he didn't need to prove anything. And that energy, unpolished but powerful, caught the attention of the producers immediately. It wasn't what they expected. It was something better. And in that moment, without anyone fully realizing it, James Bond was redefined. If you're enjoying these hidden stories behind James Bond, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, because we've got even more surprising facts coming up that you definitely don't want to miss. Number 2. Now imagine you're a studio executive in the early 1960s. You're being asked to fund a film about a British spy, not a superhero, not a war epic, not a guaranteed hit, just a spy, and not even played by a major star. That's exactly the situation United Artists found themselves in. The budget? Just over $1 million. Even at the time, that was modest. There was no sense that this would become something massive. No expectation of sequels dominating the box office. If anything, the mindset was cautious, controlled risk, something small, manageable, and easy to move on from if it didn't work. But then the film was released, and something unexpected happened. Audiences didn't just watch it, they talked about it. They came back for it. They told other people to see it. Word began to spread, and slowly that small film started to grow. By the end of its run, Dr. No had earned nearly $60 million worldwide. That's not just success, that's transformation. A project that was expected to be a minor experiment had suddenly become a major breakthrough. And just like that, everything changed. Studios saw potential, audiences wanted more, and a franchise was born almost by accident. Number 3. When people think of James Bond, they think of confidence, effortless style, a presence that fills the room without demanding attention. But here's the truth. That version of Bond didn't just happen. It was carefully built. And one of the key architects behind it was director Terence Young. Young understood something crucial. Sean Connery already had the raw qualities: strength, charisma, intensity. But to become Bond, he needed refinement. So Young took a hands-on approach. He introduced Connery to a completely different world. Tailored suits from Savile Row, fine dining etiquette, how to move through a room with calm authority, how to sit, stand, and speak without ever looking uncertain. There's even a story, one that's often repeated, that Connery was encouraged to wear his suits constantly, even off set. The idea wasn't just to look the part, it was to live it. Because Bond isn't a performance, he's a presence. And that presence had to feel natural, not forced, not exaggerated, just effortless. By the time cameras started rolling, something had changed. Connery wasn't trying to act like Bond anymore. he moved like Bond. And that difference is what audiences connected with. It's what made the character believable, and it's what set the standard for every Bond actor that followed. Fact 4. It's one of the most recognizable entrances in film history. Ursula Andress emerging from the sea as Honey Rider, sunlight reflecting off the water, a calm yet powerful presence, a moment that instantly became cinematic legend. But beneath that iconic image, there's a detail most viewers never notice. When she speaks, that voice isn't actually hers. At the time, Andress had a strong accent that producers feared might distract audiences. So in post-production, her lines were re-recorded by voice actress Nikki van der Zyl. And here's where it gets even more surprising, Andress herself didn't know until she saw the finished film. Imagine watching your own breakout performance and hearing a different voice. But instead of disrupting the moment, it enhanced it. Because everything else, the timing, the visual, the confidence was already perfect. The audience never questioned it. They just believed it. And that's the power of filmmaking. Sometimes the illusion works best when it's completely invisible. Number 5. That white bikini isn't just a costume, it's a turning point, but originally it wasn't even part of the plan. Early script versions had Honey Rider appearing in something far less striking, something safer, more conventional. But director Terence Young saw an opportunity. He wanted the introduction to feel unforgettable, not just visually appealing, but symbolic. So the design changed. The result? A clean, bold look paired with a simple but important detail: a knife belt. That one addition transformed the entire character. It suggested independence, survival, control. This wasn't just someone appearing on screen. This was someone who could handle herself, and audiences noticed. The image became iconic almost instantly. Decades later, it would be referenced, recreated, and honored, proving that sometimes a single creative decision can echo through generations of storytelling. Number 6. Long before Dr. No reached the screen, James Bond already existed in novels. And in those stories, he carried a specific weapon, a Beretta 418, small, lightweight, easy to conceal. But not everyone was convinced it suited the character. One reader in particular, Jeffrey Boothroyd, a firearms expert, had strong opinions about it. Instead of keeping those thoughts to himself, he did something simple but bold. He wrote a letter to Ian Fleming. In it, he explained why the weapon didn't match Bond's image as a skilled and dangerous operative. He suggested an alternative, the Walther PPK. More powerful, more reliable, more fitting for the character. Now, here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Fleming didn't ignore the letter. He embraced it. In the very next novel, Bond's weapon was changed. Just like that. And as a gesture of appreciation, Fleming gave Boothroyd a unique kind of recognition. He named a character after him. That character would eventually evolve into Q, the mastermind behind Bond's gadgets. So the next time you see Bond reach for his weapon, remember that choice wasn't made in a boardroom. It started with a fan and a letter. If you're enjoying uncovering these hidden stories, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because we dive deep into legendary films like this every week, and the next story might surprise you even more. Number 7. There's a moment in Dr. No that doesn't rely on explosions, fast cuts, or loud music. In fact, it does the opposite. It slows everything down. James Bond lies still, silent, and then something begins to move. A spider slowly crawling across his body. No dramatic soundtrack, no quick escape. Just stillness and tension. What makes this scene so effective is how real it feels. And that's because in many ways it was. Sean Connery reportedly had a genuine discomfort with spiders, which added an extra layer of authenticity to the performance. To film the scene, the production used a real spider under controlled conditions, with a professional handler present at all times. There are different accounts of how the scene was executed. Some suggest protective barriers were used, while others say timing and careful positioning did most of the work. But regardless of the method, the result speaks for itself. The tension feels natural, unforced, and that's why it still works decades later. Because sometimes the simplest ideas create the strongest reactions. Number 8. There's a moment early in the film that seems almost casual, a conversation, a simple introduction. But in reality, it became one of the most important moments in film history. Bond, James Bond. 6 words. That's all it took, but those 6 words did something extraordinary. They defined a character instantly. Confidence without arrogance. Calm without hesitation. Control without effort. The line itself was written by screenwriters Richard Maybaum and Johanna Harwood. But the delivery, that's where the magic happened. Sean Connery made a subtle choice. A slight pause between the words, a steady tone, no rush, no need to impress. It feels natural, almost effortless, and that's exactly why it works. Because true confidence doesn't need to announce itself. It just exists. And in that moment, James Bond became more than a character. He became a standard. Number 9. shaken, not stirred. It sounds like a simple preference, just a way to order a drink, but in reality, it tells you something much deeper about James Bond. In traditional cocktail culture, especially during the 1960s, martinis were almost always stirred. It was seen as the proper method, refined, controlled, precise. Shaking, on the other hand, that was different, less conventional, a little disruptive. So when Bond makes that choice, it stands out. It's subtle but intentional because Bond understands the rules. He just doesn't feel bound by them. And that idea shows up everywhere in his character. The way he speaks, the way he moves, the way he handles situations, he operates with confidence but on his own terms. The drink isn't just a detail, it's a signal, a small moment that quietly tells the audience, this is someone who does things differently. And if you're still with us and enjoying these deeper details about James Bond, take a second to like the video and subscribe, because the next facts reveal even more secrets behind how this legendary character was truly built.
Number 10.
On screen, Sean Connery's James Bond appears completely composed, every detail controlled, every movement intentional. But behind that polished image was something most audiences never noticed. During the filming of Dr. No, Connery was already dealing with early hair loss. For the role, he wore a carefully crafted hairpiece designed to maintain Bond's signature look. And not just in this film, in every one of his Bond appearances. What's remarkable isn't the fact itself, it's how seamlessly it was handled. The production team paid close attention to lighting, angles, and movement to ensure everything looked natural on screen. No distractions, no inconsistencies, just the image of Bond exactly as the audience expected to see him. And that's part of what makes filmmaking so fascinating. What you see is only half the story. The rest is precision, planning, and details you were never meant to notice.
Number 11.
Before the story begins, there's a moment, a visual that instantly signals what you're about to watch. The gun barrel sequence. A figure walks across the screen, stops, turns, and fires. Today, it's one of the most recognizable openings in cinema. But when it first appeared in Dr. No, it was something entirely new. Designed by Maurice Binder, the sequence gave the film a distinct identity right from the start. But here's the detail most people miss. That isn't Sean Connery in the original shot. It's stuntman Bob Simmons. At the time, it was a practical decision, but over the years it became a fascinating piece of film history, because even in one of the most iconic moments ever created, there's a hidden layer most viewers never realize.
Number 12.
You hear it instantly, and you know exactly what it is. The James Bond theme. Sharp, bold, unmistakable. But the story behind it? Not so simple. The original melody is credited to composer Monty Norman, but the version that made it legendary, the one audiences remember, was shaped by John Barry. Barry took that melody and transformed it. He added energy, structure, and that now famous guitar-driven sound. Over time, questions began to surface. Who truly created the theme as we know it? That question led to years of debate, discussion, and even legal action. Different perspectives, different claims. But one thing remains clear, without both contributions, the result wouldn't exist in the same way. It's a rare case where collaboration and controversy combine to create something timeless.
Number 13.
There's something about Dr. No that feels different. The setting doesn't just look real, it feels real. That's because it is. The film was shot in Jamaica, but this wasn't just a convenient location chosen for its beauty. For Ian Fleming, this island was home. He lived at an estate called Goldeneye, where he wrote many of the original James Bond novels. It was here, surrounded by the ocean, the heat, the stillness, that the world of Bond first took shape. So bringing the film back to Jamaica wasn't just a creative decision. It was a return to the source. And that authenticity shows up on screen. The light feels natural. The environment feels alive. Even the pace of certain scenes reflects the atmosphere of the island. For audiences in the early 1960s, especially those in colder, more industrial parts of the world, this setting offered something powerful: escape. Not just into a story, but into a completely different world.
Number 14.
Ask almost anyone what car James Bond drives, and you'll probably hear the same answer: Aston Martin. And while that's true for much of the franchise, it didn't start that way. In Dr. No, Bond drives a Sunbeam Alpine Series 2. Sleek, low profile, stylish in a quieter, more understated way. It fits this early version of Bond perfectly, less about gadgets, more about presence. At this point, the character hadn't yet evolved into the larger-than-life figure we recognize today. Everything was simpler, more grounded, more focused on subtlety. The iconic Aston Martin DB5 wouldn't appear until later, and when it did, it quickly became inseparable from the character. But this first car, it represents the beginning. A reminder that even the most recognizable elements of a franchise start somewhere else.
Number 15.
At the start of production, Ian Fleming wasn't fully convinced. In his mind, James Bond was a specific type of man. Refined, controlled, almost aristocratic, and Sean Connery, he didn't quite match that image. There was a roughness to him, a directness, a physical presence that felt very different from what Fleming had imagined on the page. At one point, Fleming reportedly dismissed him as not quite right for the role. But then filming began, and something changed. Watching Connery perform, seeing how he moved, how he delivered lines, how he carried the character, Fleming began to see something new. Not a mismatch, an evolution. Connery wasn't replacing the character, he was expanding it, adding layers that hadn't fully existed before. By the time the film was complete, Fleming's perspective had shifted entirely. He didn't just accept Connery as Bond. He recognized that this version of the character worked, perhaps even better than what he originally envisioned. And in that moment, something important happened. The character of James Bond stopped belonging only to the page and fully came to life on screen.
Number 16.
In Dr. No, the villain isn't just a lone operator. He's part of something larger, something far more organized. That force is SPECTRE, short for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Revenge, and Extortion. Even the name sounds clinical, structured, controlled. And that's exactly the point. Unlike traditional spy films of the time, which often tied villains to specific nations or political sides, SPECTRE was different. It wasn't loyal to any country. It wasn't driven by ideology. It was driven by power. This made them something far more flexible in storytelling terms. They could operate anywhere, influence anyone, and remain permanently outside of real-world politics. That decision gave the Bond universe something rare: longevity. Because instead of being tied to a specific moment in history, SPECTRE could exist across eras without losing relevance.
Number 17.
Dr. Julius No, played by Joseph Wiseman, is not a loud villain. He doesn't need to be. Everything about him is controlled, measured, deliberate, and that restraint is what makes him unsettling. In the original story, his background is shaped by rejection and transformation elements that feed into his cold, detached worldview. The film version simplifies some of that but keeps the essence: a man who has replaced humanity with calculation. His mechanical hands are more than just a physical trait. They reinforce his identity, not as someone emotional or reactive, but as someone engineered for purpose. Wiseman plays the role with minimal expression, no excess movement, no unnecessary emotion, and that's stillness becomes the threat. Because with Dr. No, danger doesn't arrive loudly. It sits in the room quietly and waits.
Number 18.
Here's where the story takes a surprising turn, because Dr. No was never supposed to be the first James Bond film. The original plan was to adapt a different novel, Thunderball. Producers Albert R. Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman had already explored that direction, even developing early screenplay material. But there was a major obstacle: a legal dispute over ownership rights involving writer Kevin McClory. The situation became complicated enough that moving forward quickly was impossible. So the producers had a decision to make: wait for the legal issues to resolve, or choose another path. They chose to pivot, and that pivot led them to Dr. No, a story that was available, adaptable, and ready for production. What seemed like a backup option became the foundation of the entire franchise, and that shift had massive consequences. Because if the legal situation had been different, the first James Bond film might have been something entirely different, maybe even delayed by years. Instead, history took a different route, one that accidentally launched a global phenomenon.
Number 19.
When Dr. No was released, it didn't simply arrive as entertainment. It arrived as something that challenged expectations. Different countries reacted in different ways, but one thing was consistent: the film felt bolder than what audiences were used to seeing at the time. Because of its tone, intensity, and certain thematic elements, it received an X certificate in the United Kingdom, restricting viewers under 16 from watching it in theaters. For a mainstream adventure film, that classification was significant. It wasn't positioned as niche or experimental cinema. It was meant for wide audiences. And yet, it carried an edge that made regulators cautious. But here's the interesting part: instead of limiting its appeal, the classification actually amplified curiosity. Audiences wanted to see what made it so different, what made it stand out. And in many ways, that restricted label became part of its identity, because James Bond wasn't meant to feel ordinary. It was meant to feel just slightly out of reach.
Number 20.
When people think of early Bond girls, they often imagine characters defined primarily by glamour or presence. But Honey Rider, played by Ursula Andress, complicates that idea. From the moment she appears, she isn't passive. She enters the story with intention, strength, independence. She carries a knife. She survives on her own. She navigates her world without relying on anyone else, and that made her different. For a film released in 1962, this portrayal stood out more than people often realize today, because she wasn't written as someone waiting to be rescued. She was written as someone already capable. The term Bond girl would eventually become a cultural label, but its origin is more complex than the phrase suggests, and Honey Rider is a big reason why. She wasn't just part of the story. She helped define what the story could include.
Bonus.
It's easy to look back now and see James Bond as a guaranteed success story, but at the time, nothing about it was certain. The rights to Ian Fleming's novels had been passed between different producers and studios for years. Ideas were developed, plans were started, and then abandoned. There was no guarantee that the character could translate into a successful film franchise. Even when Broccoli and Saltzman secured the rights and approached United Artists, expectations were cautious. The film was not seen as a major investment. It was viewed as a manageable risk, something small enough that failure wouldn't matter too much. But instead of fading quietly, it succeeded. And that success didn't just create a hit film, it created a system, a formula, a legacy that would continue for decades. Because from a modest budget and a relatively unknown lead actor, and a studio that didn't expect much, a global phenomenon was born. More than 6 decades later, Dr. No still stands as more than just the first James Bond film. It's the foundation of a cultural icon, a character that evolved beyond expectations, a franchise that grew far beyond its original scope, and a film that succeeded not because everything was certain, but because enough things went right at exactly the right time. From casting doubts to creative risks to accidental breakthroughs, every piece came together to form something lasting. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like the video, share your favorite fact in the comments, and subscribe for more cinematic breakdowns like this. And now the question is, which James Bond film should we explore next? Because the story doesn't end here, it just evolves.